We have
She'll be
Cheryl,
back.
Doreen, and Connie here from the New Jersey Alzheimer's Association to help us with the finances and how to deal with that for our, even for yourself. None of us are getting younger. We're not Timothy Bottoms.
It's
You know,
so
none of
true.
us are getting younger. So this information is good for you and good for you to share with your family. So I'm gonna turn it over to Cheryl and continue to eat and write down any questions that you may have for them. So they're here to stay and answer your questions as well. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you, Sis Drew. Tell me if you can't hear me. I'm not sure that I need the mic, but if you're having trouble hearing me, you let me know, and I will use the mic. So thank you for having us back. I so enjoyed Purple Sunday back in early August when I first got to know St. Matthew AME Church. I was here with Doreen and Connie at that time. Pastor welcomed us in, and I started to learn. I did not become an expert overnight, and I still am not an expert about what goes on in St. Matthew AME Church, but I'm learning. And that's how financial literacy is. We learn a step at a time. And the first way to learn is to be present, right? The second way is to pay attention. Understand that you don't know everything, and try to take one little step at a time. So Sis Drew, I didn't know she was going to talk about phishing. That's what she was saying. When somebody calls and they're trying to say, I'm from Bank of America, or I'm from blah, blah, blah. I'm your insurance agent, I just took over. That's phishing. They're fishing and seeing if they can catch a fish, right? So we do work with a lot of financial institutions who do presentations like that with us. So Sis Drew, now I'm going to work on that next to try to come in with one of our banking partners to talk to you about how to protect yourself. But the first and best thing is what Sis Drew said. You say no thank you, I'm going to report you. You hang up.
The thing that's important to remember is don't say yes. Never say yes on the phone.
Oh,
Because
okay.
once you say yes, you actually trigger their program. So say whatever you have to say, just, you don't, these are not people you have to be polite to, I'm sorry.
And sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes you can't tell who's real and who isn't. So you can, you know what's really good? Can I have your phone number? I'm going to need to call you back after I check this out. And if they hang up, game over, right? And you should report it. It's called reporting phishing. And there usually are, people at the bank who will tell you how to report something that sounds suspicious. So unfortunately, we do live in that kind of world right now. But knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. It's the only thing that really changes the course of any situation, is to live and learn, as they say. So we're going to talk about managing money. This program is for people who don't have a lot of money and people who have so much money, they don't know what to do with it. Because the same things can happen. Did you ever hear about wealthy actors and, artists or, great leaders of countries, and you hear that they died broke? Did you ever hear that?
Yes.
Happens all the time. Because they're not properly managing their money. They are entrusting it to someone and assuming that everything good is happening, and later found out that it was not. And it's sad, because it doesn't need to happen that way. So now I'm going to shift gears from that big, huge example to a really small one that happens to us every day. Have you ever gone to the grocery store and you didn't make a list? And you're really hungry?
Yeah.
Bad thing. You start buying things, spending more money, you check out and go, I don't know what I have. I have one bag, it was $100. And then you get home and you forgot the milk. Right? The very thing you went to the store for. We all do this. We all do this. Financial planning is the same way. It's not going to go away whether you plan or you don't. You're going to have situations in your life where you have to address it. And if you don't have a plan, it doesn't have to be the perfect plan. But if you don't have a plan, it is not going to go as well as you hoped. Right? I just heard Connie on the phone talking to someone saying, I'm so sorry, but that family does not have very many options left. And I got like that rock in my stomach where I thought, probably because they didn't start early enough thinking about it. And that doesn't mean you have to be a financial wizard. Maybe you were not even good at math as a kid, and you like, I can't do this. First of all, get the I can't thing out of your head. If you can earn the money, you can manage the money. Okay? You're just as smart as the next person. I had really bad math teachers as a kid, and I had this thing growing up that I didn't understand math. I don't even know if either one of you knew that about me. I'm so good at math now. I was mad. I was mad growing up that I didn't have good math teachers, and I was not ever going to understand math. And as soon as I got rid of that limiting belief about myself, everything changed. You can't be the executive director of anything if you don't understand how to manage the budget. And I'm so detailed with the budget, they laugh. They say Cheryl knows how much every paperclip costs. Didn't happen overnight, but it started with me making the decision of, I don't want to feel like I don't understand the math, and I don't want to have to ask a lot of questions, but I'm never going to be a math genius. I don't have to be. I have to be financially literate, which I am. And I'll make sure you all leave feeling really confident about your financial literacy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the learning objectives. Understand how caregiving affects finances. List the legal and financial documents caregivers should put into place. That's another scary term. I'm not a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. How am I going to know what the lawyer's talking about? There are some very basic things that must be put into place when you're making financial decisions for other people. Sis Drew, I'm sure you found out about a lot of that. I mean, she was a discharge expert, thank God. Was she also a lawyer? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe she relied on somebody else for that. And suddenly she has to figure out, oh my, I have to have power of attorney. I have to, you know, both of our names are on everything. The deed to the house, all the accounts, the cars. He can't make those decisions anymore. I have to start to shift that. I don't know how to do that. You're going to have to talk to some kind of legal counsel, okay? And it doesn't always have to be expensive. We'll talk about that. Prepare for useful discussions about financial decisions and planning. Sis Drew and I were chatting about this. When there are too many cooks in the kitchen, it gets so messy. It gets so messy. Mom's got plenty of money. What, are you trying to take her money? Why do you have to be in control of money? Or, Dad doesn't have a dime. What difference does it make? Just put him somewhere. So having those financial decisions with your family before it becomes a crisis is really important. So I'll go there for a minute. I believe myself to be very healthy right now, pretty agile most days. I talk to my adult children about what my wishes are, where the money is, how it is labeled, when they can touch it, and they say, why are you talking about this? You going somewhere? Did you get a cancer diagnosis? Like this goes on, right? And my husband is like, I'm not talking about it, I don't want to talk about it. I talk about it. They know where the keys to the safe are. They know generally what is in the safe. They do not have to study it. And they know to pick the safe up and bring it to the attorney. That's all. Just go. You know where it is. Don't lose the key. Don't fight over it. Get in the car together. Go to the attorney. Okay? That's all. I don't make them study it. There's no math quiz at the end of the conversation. Do you know where the items are? Do you understand the terms? They don't have to think about that. But they do have to know that Mom has a plan, even if nobody wants to talk about the plan, and they don't have to be scared. The other half of that is, Mom gets a say. This isn't what you want to do with it, what you want to do. It's already in there, what I want. So, if you don't tell them, you will have no say when you can no longer speak. So you must tell them, unless you don't care about what happened. Just put me somewhere. You know, I hear my husband says all the time, he's a fireman. Oh, just put me in the old fireman's home. I said, don't tempt me, because I will. Okay? Yeah, Connie knows me well, and she knows I would say that. But the old fireman's home is all the way up in North Jersey. We just bought a house in South Jersey. How's that working? So maybe that easy answer of, I can just go to the fireman's home, it's almost free. Well, then I have to drive up and down the parkway several hours. What if I'm not feeling so good at that time? So it's all about, do we have a plan or are we just guessing? If we want to have a say in what happens, we need to talk about it early and often, but not to the point where it's, you know, all the time. People just need to know she's got a plan, okay, for when the time comes. Identify steps to lower the chances of financial abuse and fraud. Sis Drew didn't even know that was going to be on the objectives, and she just told you how to do it. People love a good scam, right? So you have to be a little smarter. Thank you so much. Can I have your full name, phone number, and email address? Let me check into this and I'll get back to you. No one is going to give you that who is a scam artist. Okay? Begin to create a backup plan in case you can no longer provide care. This one makes me scratch my head. I always have a plan B. I don't really have a caregiver plan B because I'm not quite in that caregiver role yet, but I know I could be. And I don't know what my plan B would be yet. So sometimes you don't have the answers yet, but just thinking about, oh yeah, I got to get to that. I got to get to that eventually. Because we can't assume that we're invincible, right? My husband has Parkinson's. It's very well managed. He functions as if he doesn't have Parkinson's, but eventually that's going to change. Will I be well enough to be his caregiver? I hope so. If not, what is my plan B? I'm just starting to try to figure that out, right? So I don't have all the answers either. But, you know, there is a very large percentage of the world that says, that's going to be your problem. I'm just living my life. That's not exactly the best way to go. We should have some inkling of what our plan is and what we would want, and have it well conveyed to others, and kind of feel out who might be your backup. I already know which of my kids. I already know. And she's like, you're going to dump this on me, aren't you? No, I am not. Because he's going to do the heavy lifting, and you're going to do all the detailed stuff. That's as far as I've gotten. I don't know anything else. Okay? But you already know who in your network could probably handle this if they had to. Start prepping them. Okay, so what are the definitions? A caregiver is a family member, friend, or legal guardian who supports someone with their health needs and well-being, someone who manages money or pays for the expenses of another person. Okay. Finances are money or things that are worth money, like assets. Your house, your car, your wedding band. Okay? Financial literacy, this is where we started. Understanding how to manage money from handling day-to-day expenses to planning for the future. Financial literacy sounds like it should be a college course. It sounds all fancy. No, it's not. It's like, do you understand what's going out and coming in, and, you know, can you balance your checkbook? Right? Are you paying your bills on time? Are you spending more than you have excessively? You know, that's financial literacy. Okay, costs of caregiving. Financial literacy is especially important for caregivers. It makes them feel more confident. Caregiving is a full-time job. We have someone here who was a caregiver and managed for her husband's care and also managed all the finances. You know, sometimes even when you think you have a handle on it, the longer it goes on, the scarier it gets, because you start thinking the bucket's going to empty out. All right? Is this going to go on longer than what I planned for? That's normal. That's normal. But the fear will be less if you have put some thought into this. If this happens, I do this. If that happens, I do that. And if that third thing happens, I'm out alone. But at least I have plan A and B, right? Caregivers are under a lot of stress. They tend to get sick because they're not taking care of themselves. So I'm going to advise you to take care of yourself. Go to the doctor. Yes, go get your hair done. Don't feel guilty about it. You need to be able to do those things and function well in your own life, because you're probably not sleeping right and you're probably worried about finances all the time. So we're going to try to help you with some of that. Okay. What percentage of caregivers do you think have out-of-pocket costs, meaning they have to open their wallet unexpectedly for something all the time? What do you think? Wild guess. Anybody?
Shout it out.
80%.
Yeah, close, very close, and that's about right. About 78%, 80%. More than 3/4 of caregivers have out-of-pocket expense costs as a result of caregiving, including household and medical expenses. All of a sudden, the insurance card's not going through for that medication, you know how that goes at the pharmacy. And now you're arguing with the pharmacist that something must not be right. This happens to all of us, right? And now you need to get the medicine home, and you can't argue anymore, suddenly you're paying for things, right? Oh, impact on employment, this is huge. You were doing fine, you were both working. You expected that to go on for a while. Suddenly, one of you can no longer work. Although we specialize in Alzheimer's and dementia, it could be anything that causes that, right? Suddenly, the person has to stop working sooner, or reduce their hours, take time off, now your boss is getting mad, retire earlier than you expected to take care of a loved one. Now the plan's all shook up. We all figure, well, if I reach this age, all my retirement benefits will kick in and my Medicare will kick in and we'll all be just fine until something happens before that. So you should be thinking about those benefits that you get at a certain age. You should. But you should have a plan B. What would I do if I needed something sooner? How am I going to handle that?
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could, and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care, facility care.
Memory care is very expensive. So this is talking about the caregiver's health. Caregivers tend to think of the person, the caregivee, before themselves, okay? I can't go to the doctor. I can't even get him out of the shower. How am I going to the doctor, right? No, I can't think about eating right. Like I'm just eating anything. I don't even have time to cook. I'm grabbing a cup of coffee and a donut, that's it. We don't have time, okay? Caregiving is an all-consuming job. So we start to not take care of ourselves. So now we're not sleeping enough, we're not eating right, we are constantly under stress, we haven't been to the doctor for a physical in 2 years. I mean, it happens overnight, right? But the longer it goes on, the more at risk we're putting ourselves, then you're gonna start to incur medical expenses, your ability to work becomes impeded. Now there are 2 of you or more who are down, and it just has a domino effect. So it's very normal for this to happen. We have to force ourselves to say, no, I really don't have time to do this, but I need to ask a friend to come over for an hour. I've got to go to the doctor. I've been ignoring this pain in my whatever arm for 3 months now, okay? So do we think Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging? No. The risk factors, the greatest risk factor is aging, and the risks go up as we age, but it is not normal, okay? It's a progressive and fatal brain disease. It's not a normal part of aging. Okay, so before we go on to what does this have to do with finances, sometimes the early cognitive impairment gets overlooked. One of the first places you can notice it is in the checkbook. Okay, like, this doesn't make sense. This is in here 3 times. Or there's no date. Or the tally's not right. You know, I'm really bad with this because my husband loves that checkbook. So, my check. Do you need a check? This is hysterical, okay? We've been married 30 years. When I go out the door, he's like, do you need money? I'm like, oh, thanks, Dad, can I have $20? Like, he wants to control the money. And so I let him do it, because it's his thing. But every once in a while I say, I don't really have to ask you, do I? I mean, we're both earning the money. And we start to laugh, but it's his role. So when you're caring for somebody, when that's been their shtick, I do the checkbook. I deal out the cash, I'm the man, right? Sometimes I'll go a couple months without even looking at what's going on in the checkbook. And then what I tell him is like, I want to make sure I wrote my check in. That's not what I'm doing. I'm checking to make sure his math is still right. I'm like, yeah, I think I forgot to put the date on this one. Show me what you're doing online there. I want to learn. I really want to make sure he's still doing it right. Okay? So it's a little bit of both. But the way I have to approach him is, he is the expert. I don't pay attention to that stuff enough. But I need to make myself familiar enough that I could step in if I had to, because that's how he's paying the mortgage. I don't want to lose the house if something happens and he can no longer compute how to pay the mortgage online. Okay? So this is where we get into, I'm going to give you the answer to this one. Alzheimer's doesn't always affect a person's memory. It affects their personality. It affects their judgment with spending. It affects their ability to compute math. Okay? So memory, thinking, behavior, and this includes their ability to manage money. Back to Sis Drew's point of, do not let someone with mild cognitive impairment even just starting to show signs of maybe this is dementia, take strange phone calls. Right. You don't let that happen. So there are 3 stages to the disease. In the early stage, when we're talking about cognitive impairment, that's when you might start noticing some of those errors occur. You might brush them off. I suggest that you jot them down. Okay? All right, there was just this one little thing with the checkbook. All right? Oh, just happened again, 3 months later. Start jotting it down. Is it a one-off? Was there just one mistake? One check that didn't clear? One time the balance was off, or is it starting to become frequent? But, you know, getting it early on is important, because in the later stages you're going to have to manage it. So in the beginning, there might be lack of paying bills. Sometimes it's paying it multiple times because the person knows they're getting forgetful, so they'll pay it multiple times because they think they forgot. And as we know, as the disease gets worse, the person will not be able to communicate their wishes or make financial decisions. Early planning allows the person to participate in decisions about the future. So, you know, if you're noticing, okay, so now suppose I was noticing my husband started to mess up the checkbook. My gut instinct would be like, give me that. Just give me that. But I can't do that. I need to figure out a way to sit down and say, you know, I'm confused. Something doesn't look right in here. I think it might have been me. Can we look at it? Because the person will be less defensive, and now you're looking at it together, and then slowly you're going to move those responsibilities into your lane. Slowly. Not in a disrespectful, abrupt way, even though you're like, give me that thing because we can't bounce another check. You can't approach it that way. And I have to remind myself of that. Okay. So this general diagram shows what happens. When you're a full-time caregiver or even a part-time caregiver, your income goes down, your expenses go up. That's financial literacy. That's not complicated, right? Your income is now, you know, not flowing as freely, and your expenses just went up unexpectedly, right?
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
It's very normal to feel that way. I'm going to pause there because Connie Roberson is here with us. Not only did she care for her husband and have to navigate all of those things, she does this for a living. She changed her career completely because she saw how families struggle with this. And she talks to them every day about, you know, what they can afford to do at this point and how long that might last. So how important the decisions are that they make now, because they're gonna have long-term impact. Connie, can you just share a little bit about what your story was and then why you do what you do?
Thank you, Cheryl. So, some of you know me from St. Matthew when I was a member here, so it's always good to be back in this building. But some of you knew my husband, like my cousin over here knew my husband. And he suffered with Alzheimer's disease, pretty much diagnosed in 2015, but we saw signs in like 2012. And I noticed that he was downsized from the company that he'd been working for 43 years. Suddenly, he's on the chopping block, and he was one of the vice presidents and project managers. So I knew that they saw something, and we started seeing the signs as well. And then when I left the company in 2015, that's when I decided I'm going to go with him to the doctor and figure out what's going on, why he can't pronounce words anymore, why he can't remember. This man used to write he was a math whiz. He was a wizard at math. So that's when we got the diagnosis that he had Alzheimer's or either primary progressive aphasia. It was just so many different things. He had dural ABF. It was just all these different things, so we couldn't really pinpoint it. But I'm saying all these things to say that that's when I was like, what do I do? And at that point, I had changed my career and I became a senior living advisor. So what I do, I have a business, it's called Oasis Senior Advisors, and I help families to find assisted living, memory care, independent living communities, but it's basically based on the budget, you know, what their person's care level needs are, as well as their location preference. So that was the beginning, and that helped me to know what my next steps were. So I had all these people that I knew in the field that helped me. And one of the first things was, does he have a pension? Is it over a certain amount? I have a pension. So it's different when you're planning for a couple as opposed to if you're planning for a parent. The planning is different because something is happening with your spouse and you do have to take that person to an assisted living or memory care. What happens to you? Because the places usually want you to spend down 24 months of your own money before they will even allow you to go on Medicaid. Medicaid at that point will say, oh, your spouse has money, they have a retirement, so use your money as well. You have to plan. That's my point. You have got to see maybe an elder law attorney, a financial planner, and you need someone that's going to listen to you, someone that will sit down and explain to you. My elder law attorney is wonderful. He's explaining things to me, and I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying, Adam. And he said, well, we'll sit here until you do. You want someone that's going to help you to understand what you're doing, where your money's going, how to plan it out. And it's because there's so many different strategies. Everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. You got to sit down and develop a plan that works best for you. And basically that's what we had to do. We planned it out to spend down his money until he could go on Medicaid. But then my social security, my retirement went into some type of annuity that once it becomes income, Medicaid will look at it. So I'm saying it's just so many different strategies.
And only an attorney's gonna be able to tell you.
Right.
All these trusts that are out
And
there.
trust, there
Yes,
is
that
just
you
so,
can protect your money.
there are some people that even have Medicaid divorces, where, because maybe the person who's in assisted living was the primary breadwinner, and the other person didn't have a large salary, so you get a divorce, half is yours, half is theirs. So now you spend down theirs, but you still have yours because you're divorced. But you gotta, is that the best strategy for you? So I'm saying there are just different things. So you definitely wanna be able to plan and think about finances.
So you gotta look at your options. So, and that all sounds a little scary and complicated, right? But just to know what your options are. As soon as you're starting to see some changes, that doesn't mean you say, we're gonna get in the car now and go to the attorney, but you better start thinking about, wow, if this becomes more than just an occasional forgetful thing, I really need to know what I'm dealing with. So I have to get a diagnosis and really have an understanding of what could happen next. So I think you might have a question?
I would like the name of her elder care attorney.
Mine, his name is Adam Rubin.
Well, I think it's funny before you leave.
Okay,
Yes.
so, and one, the other thing I was going to say is, you don't have to do this alone. There are senior living advisors, there are care managers, there are people that can help you through this journey. And like I said, even my company is called Oasis Senior Advisors. We have 3 advisors in New Jersey. So if you get to the point where you say, okay, I think I need to have this person in a memory care, contact one of us. And what we'll do is we'll sit down with you, we'll go through the different options, we'll talk about your finances, or we'll just be there to support you. We'll guide you to the Alzheimer's Association so that this was a resource for me.
You know what I worry about is, I have a home, and I have 2 sons. And I always wonder, I have a will, but I don't, but if I go into a nursing home or something, they're gonna come out to the house, right?
And a lot of people say that they're going to take my house.
Yeah.
They can
That's-
put a lien against it,
Okay,
but that's when I,
usually the house. That's what I want to know.
but
It depends on the circumstance.
Right, that's what you need to sit down with somebody to plan that one out.
Yeah, often the home is protected.
Right.
It's just the liquid assets, the ones that, like cash and stuff, that are accessible. But you have to talk to an attorney.
Exactly,
I
because
have a
you can
regular
put a
will,
home in trust
but
as
I
well.
need to talk to someone.
Yeah.
And there's something called a living will.
Mhm.
So, thank goodness, having a will is really important. You can do it yourself, you don't have to pay an attorney to do it. You can order little forms online.
Yeah.
So that part is just expressing what your wishes would be upon your death. But your wishes while you're alive, this, again, the example of my husband, he doesn't want to talk about what if when we are alive. His mother is in her 80s. I say, what does she want while she is alive? We keep talking about what she's going to do with the house and her money when she dies. She wants to tell everybody, you're getting this and you're getting this when I'm gone. Everybody's going to get this much money. And I'm thinking, I don't really even want to think about that. What, Mom, do you want if you live to be 100? That's what I need to know. How am I taking care of you until you're 100? I'm less concerned with getting part of the house once you go to heaven. I'm much less concerned about that. I want to know how I'm going to take care of you until you're 100. So, very good point. You should talk to an elder care attorney. Doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow. Don't feel like you're automatically going to lose your home, but because you shouldn't. Usually your home is protected.
They have so many different trusts that are available,
Right.
which basically, it's like putting a little corral around a certain thing, certain monies, your house, certain assets, you can lock them up so that they're not able to touch those. But there are a lot of ways in which you can keep your home even if you're not able to live in it personally.
Right.
But again, it all comes down to finding the best resource.
Right.
That's really it.
Yes.
I wanted to know if you had a card or something about your agency. I'm sitting here thinking about somebody that I would like to give
I
it
do.
to. Okay,
I don't have any brochures, but I do have cards.
okay, thank you.
So the other thing that's starting to bubble up here is we're talking about a bank that you can trust to protect you from phishing, right? We're talking about an elder care lawyer. We're talking about senior care advisors. So we're starting to hear that surrounding ourselves with greatness, you'll hear me say that phrase all the time. Choose well. Choose doctors who can talk to you and aren't going to poo-poo you or act like you're stupid, okay? There are a lot of great doctors out there who will talk to you like you are a human who is trying to navigate and not like you're a nonsensical, you don't understand any of this, okay? Same thing with your banker. That's your money in that bank. They should be talking to you respectfully, right? A lawyer, Connie was talking about her lawyer. He says, we're going to sit here until you understand it. Let me try to use different words, right? So I think sometimes we get intimidated, they're the expert, I'm just gonna, they're a little nasty, but they're the expert, I'm just gonna have to deal with it. No, you don't. You need to surround yourself with people who make your journey better, and who you're gonna feel comfortable picking up the phone and calling when you have a silly question. Okay? So we see all these things happening to caregivers, the anxiety, the stress, depression, isolation. The person with dementia is becoming less verbal, so are you, because you just can't talk to anybody about this, they don't get it. That's why you have to surround yourself with greatness early. Who would I want around me if I had to navigate this journey? Right? And we already talked about people younger than 65 can develop Alzheimer's, and that is more expensive because we're not necessarily getting Medicare yet. Okay? So people living with younger onset face additional financial challenges. Many report losing or quitting one or more jobs because cognitive changes affect their work. As a result, some may not be able to maximize benefits such as disability insurance, FMLA, COBRA. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their care partners have less time to plan for the future, including less time to build savings for retirement. There's one other thing that I'm going to say. Fortunately, Medicare does now often kick in for people with younger onset. So, in other words, usually you would have to wait until you are either 60 or 65, depending on the circumstance. But with younger onset, you often can collect it earlier with a 2-year waiting period. It is 2 years. They have to pay 2 years before the benefit will kick in. Well, I don't know what in your situation, what the circumstance was, but sometimes you have to wait 2 years before that benefit will come forward fully. So Doreen experienced this in a different way. She had an early onset diagnosis that caused her to have to stop working earlier. So I'm going to turn it over to her to share her story about that.
So nice to be back here, and delicious food, I appreciate that. So I'm 70 now, excuse me, and when I was 62, I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And like Cheryl said, I had to leave work relatively quickly. It took a year for me to get a final diagnosis, and that was in April of 2016, and I left work in July of 2016, so it was relatively soon after. Now, several things, and I'm a single woman. I don't have brothers and sisters or children or anybody who's going to provide care for me, so I was kind of in this by myself. And like Cheryl said, you have to learn quickly, but you have to learn. And the first thing I did was I went to the Alzheimer's Association's website, and they had a checklist for those who just recently got diagnosed. And I religiously went through this checklist, and one of the first things I did was to find an elder lawyer. And like Connie, she was phenomenal, and it's such a complicated process with multiple things that are involved. And we went through every step, everything that we had to talk about, every decision we had to make together. And I told her what I wanted, and she figured out a way to do it. So that became, and there's multiple things. Obviously, a last will and testament, that I had to do that. And then a living will, which is basically, it tells people what your wishes are when you're no longer able to make decisions on your own health care. And with that is something called a healthcare proxy. And this is the person who's going to speak to the healthcare provider for you. So this is a person who has to know and agree to your decision about certain things. Going on machines for life support, certain medications, certain things that they may or may not want to do for you to extend your life, when you may not want to really have that. So choosing that person is vital. And I was blessed. I found somebody who I know, I trust with my life, and literally trust with my life. The other thing was, again, I was expecting to die at my desk. I figured I'll be 85, 90 years old, and they'll be dragging me out because I won't leave. Because it was me and my dog, so And so that was my life, my work. And that didn't happen. So financially, I literally lost 70% of my income, like that. Now, I had a different experience with Medicare. Medicare now considers early onset Alzheimer's disease as a catastrophic illness. Meaning, there's a couple different diseases, which that means that it's incurable, you're going to die from it, there's no way you're going to work. And so I actually got approved like in 2 weeks.
And this is talking about the 2-year waiting period between the Social Security disability insurance and then Medicare eligibility.
Right, and now what happened was I was on it long enough, so you go on disability from 62 to 65, and then they convert you over to traditional Medicare. And then it was, one of the problems I had was finances. And I couldn't figure out what, I paid it, I didn't pay it, I sort of paid it, I double paid it. I spent money I wasn't figuring, because I didn't realize I didn't have that money. And the person who was actually my healthcare provider is also my financial advisor. And so I do best because when I have less stress, which is probably what we all do, right? And so all my financial issues, or all my bills are on auto pay. She manages my I would say my investments, but my retirement funds. And because of that, with my little income, I mean, I'm lucky I make 5 figures, never mind 6. And I'm able to still live because she has helped to manage the money so that I can get an income from that. So again, it's like Cheryl said, it's surrounding yourself with greatness and with trusting people. My healthcare provider, I would walk on hot coals for her. She's great. She calls me all the time. She asks me questions. You know, she's helping me navigate some research ideas and things like that. So it's the thing that makes this disease manageable, and not only as the person with the disease, but the person providing care, is having the resources around you, the support around you, that you can go and say, I need help. I can't figure this out. How do I figure this out? And they will help you. And it has to be a trusting person. You know, so, you know, when you have 1 kid, 6 kids, no kids, you know, finding a person that you can say, that you can trust, and that you can exchange it. So I worked myself through the financial system that way, you know, but it's not an easy journey. It's not something I know I could not have done by myself. You know, so that was really the best. So going to the elder lawyer, getting all that paperwork done, getting help with the Medicare. And also, one thing that I appreciated my elder lawyer saying, at the point when it becomes, you'll have to go on Medicaid, I will work you through the steps. Connie said, and Sister said, it's a complicated process, and it's easy to screw it up. And unfortunately, if you screw it up, they don't care. You know, and even if they make mistakes. So this way, I have somebody I know that when that time comes, I can say, you know, I think it's time for me to go on Medicaid, you know, and can you help me? And she will, you know, because I have to kind of plan my steps in my life. You know, right now I live independently in a 62+ apartment complex. My next step is assisted living, if I can afford it. I may call Connie. And I know where I want to go. I just have to figure out if I can, you know, if I can afford it. And then the next step after that would be a nursing home. You know, but I've had in my mind, and I've worked this out with the person who's my financial advisor. You know, this is how I'd like to see it go. How do we take my finances and match that thought process? In fact, there's funny stories. She is also a very dear friend, and her birthday is in August. I always take her out to dinner, and I call her and I say, I had to ask my financial advisor if I could take my friend out to dinner, and she always says yes. So because it's her birthday, but yeah. So it's you know, like Cheryl said, and Connie said, it's a matter of finding support and planning. You know, it's what if. How do I, you know, you don't have to have all the answers now, because you can't have the answers till you're sort of in a situation, but at least you have a plan.
But Doreen, what I would like to say is that it may not always be that easy depending on your community.
Right.
So the information and the resources might be more available in other communities.
Sure, I mean, look,
That-
obviously.
No, so that's what I'm saying, reach out to someone that can provide you with those resources.
Right.
If you go to like a care manager or a senior living advisor, we can provide you with the resources that might be available in your area or somewhere else.
And that's important, because you have to have somebody located where you are.
And that's what we're trying to work on, right, Cheryl? To have the resources available in all the communities.
Right,
No matter where you live, you should have the access to it, and that's really
But
what it's
it's
about.
not equal.
right, and people should not be asking you for upfront money. You know, a lot of these resources, particularly your initial ones, are free.
Yeah.
And then there may come a point where there are certain fees involved with an attorney or whomever is helping you. But, you know, anyone who's gonna ask you for a check up front before they even help you, no. No, people should be connecting you to some resources, educate yourself a little bit, and then we make determinations of what the actual costs for these things are, and if that is something that you wish to do or can afford. Yes.
My mother was in the nursing home for.
No, I mean,
I'm sorry, I can't hear her. Go ahead.
My mother was in the nursing home for 15 years, and I had power of attorney over her health as far as making all the decisions for her. I'm just too young. And also, what we done was, we went to Woody, we made a funeral arrangement.
Okay,
And what happened is, my mother's from Virginia, was from Virginia, right? And what we've done is we set it up so when she passed, Woody was took her body to Virginia to put up beside my father.
oh, nice, because you prearranged it.
Yeah, Mama and I went over and we set up and she told her what she wanted. And we made a pre-approval arrangement and then, like they set there's a certain amount of money we put on it.
Right.
And we got interest on it.
Right, right. So what we're talking about here is pre-planning for one's funeral. If someone wishes to do that, that is a financial investment. But what you're describing is controlled costs. Because many situations like that, there's a set cost. And they're saying, if you pay this now, we're not going to change the price on you, and this is what it includes, and you will not have to worry about it later.
Additional with it.
Right.
Like something, we put something like $1,000 down, and then maybe we might have to pay like 500 more to have a body driven to Virginia.
But you had options. And that means the person who you are caring for would have a say. So a lot of people do that now. They pre-plan certain things. This is what I would want. I don't want anything fancy. I want this. And this organization, this funeral home or mortuary is saying that they will do it for this price. So, you know, maybe you don't want to talk about that. Some people feel like that's too morbid for them. But, so what are the things that we would want to consider? Sometimes our loved one is obsessed with one thing. I don't care about anything that happens over here, but I want this one thing. Maybe you can put that in place for them while they can still have a say in the decision. So if we don't have the conversations, we're not going to know what's important to our loved one or even really have a good handle on what we may need. Okay? So preparing for the unanticipated is what we're talking about here. We all hope that we live long enough to be able to start collecting Medicare benefits. They are available to people with younger onset. When exactly they'll kick in, you need to sit down with an expert to figure that part out. For LGBTQ communities, it's more difficult because often we don't have a spouse, we don't have children. Sometimes our social circle where there are people who we could depend on to make these decisions might be a little smaller. So we have to figure out who in this situation we would trust. Low income. Generally, people with low income might be a little less prepared for some of these unexpected costs. That doesn't mean that you can't be prepared if that happens to be the category that we fall into. Right? There are a lot of free resources out there. We just have to know what they are. A lot of attorneys who will do pro bono work. A percentage of their portfolio is pro bono, which means they're not going to charge, right? Senior care specialists, senior living advisors. That's not coming out of your pocket typically, it's coming out of someone else's pocket. So you should be able to ask those questions freely and make those decisions based on what you can afford. So again, what do you think the answer is to this one? Who can benefit by putting financial plans into place for the future? Everyone. Better to have a plan that's imperfect than no plan.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions. To have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life, that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
So this is really important to talk about because the caregiver role is not only stressful, there's so much guilt. You know, mom can't tell me what she wants. I don't know, am I making the right choices? Then siblings get involved, spouses, you know, long lost so-and-so shows up and says, well, how do you know what she would want? If your loved one has that written down, I don't care if it's written with a crayon. If I can no longer make this decision, I don't want any fighting about this. It's A and it's B. And don't blame Gloria, she's just trying to help. Have her write it down with a magic marker. Because when the time comes, and people are going to question you, and they have the best intentions, they show up out of nowhere, suddenly they're the great protector, right? Well, I always was mom's favorite, because you know I am the one who's good at math. Meanwhile, you've lived in Kentucky for the past 8 years. You don't even understand what's going on with mom's care. Okay? And you know these things happen. So I did think about that while mom was still able to make those decisions. Let me just take this out of my purse because mom told me this. And then it's game over. You're no longer, you can still be the sibling, and there's less tension in your relationship. You cannot be harbored with guilt, less fighting. I'm not going to tell you never a harsh word will be said because the dementia journey is really hard. And when money is involved, it gets a lot messier. So if you can kind of stay in that, this isn't me, this is what they wanted. My uncle had dementia. I was his caregiver. He had no siblings, but he had probably 80 little nieces and nephews. And while he still had some pretty sharp cognition, I said to him, Uncle Phil, do you want me to split up your assets with all of your nieces and nephews? He said, no. I said, oh, it's not going to be pretty. They're going to come out of the woodwork. I brought an attorney in and had an attorney document everything that he wanted. And when the time came, I showed the family the document. I said, this was not me. The attorney didn't even want me in the room. He said, you go over there. I don't want him influenced. So I was able to say I wasn't even in the room. He did this with the attorney while he could still make those decisions. And I was able to exit clean, right? So you'll know the person's wishes, you'll feel more confident, less guilt, less chance of making costly, unwise decisions or something that people wouldn't have wanted. And also, keep yourself out of trouble with your friends, family, relatives.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about, and we put plans in place for if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. And really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. It can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
So we know that, we talked about the benefits of early planning.
One,
I'm going to skip a few of these because I want to make sure that we have enough time for everything. We know that talking about money makes people nervous. You're going to have to find a way to have those awkward conversations. It may not go well the first time, probably won't. And then you might be gun shy, basically, to ever bring it up again. But you're going to have to figure out a way to come at it differently. So if that didn't go well, when does it go well? Oh, she always listens when one of the grandkids says we might need to talk about it, right? When little Susie says, Grandma, I want to make sure everything goes just how you would want it when you're in heaven. And suddenly Grandma's cool with the conversation, right? I'm definitely going to skip some of these, but I want to make sure.
Advice,
Sorry, I want to make sure, start with a positive statement. Remember I said about, I can't rip the checkbook out of my husband's hand, although sometimes I want to? I think I'm the one who made the mistake, even if you know you didn't. Can we sit down and do this together? Is less confrontational, right?
Yes.
So you know what your loved one's triggers are, and they know yours. So try to figure out what always works well. Sometimes when I put a little music on, things go better. Okay? And always saying what remember when I said I always tell my kids what I would want? To try to get my husband to talk about what he would want. So say, if I couldn't make these decisions anymore, I would want to know I could trust somebody to do what I would have done. Don't you want that? By the way, what is it that you want done? Right? So this is what I was trying to flip to when I was moving fast through the slides. Sometimes having a little plan, writing it down works, and all these documents are in your folder. So I'm not expecting you to write a 20-page paper about it, but if you know, gosh, whenever I do that and they're hungry, they start to yell. I can't do this when we're driving, they turn the radio on. Figure out, take a few notes. Does it work at this time? Does it work at that time? And sometimes when you sit down and you're both looking at something objective, like the checkbook, it becomes less about the human beings and more about the check. Okay? We talked about avoiding abuse and fraud, so we're going to skip that.
People living with dementia are more susceptible perhaps to fraud and financial abuse than other people because they have a disease that's attacking their brain. And so their ability to solve problems, to think about things logically, to have insight may be impaired, and they may be able to be tricked by people they trust or people who seem nice or seem trustworthy in a way that they wouldn't have been at an earlier time.
I do want to pause on that. If you have someone coming into the house to care for your loved one for a few hours and you're starting to notice funny things, cash is missing, jewelry's missing, your loved one with dementia is starting to trust that person a little too much with personal information, just keep your eyes open to what's going on, okay? With my uncle, a person was coming in, giving him a sandwich, giving him a little kiss on the forehead, I don't know where that came from, and then taking the cash and leaving. And that's when I put the kibosh on that. You are no longer having someone come into the house. This is some of the signs, strange large purchases, unopened bills, multiples of the same item being bought, repeat donations, gotta watch those telemarketers, missing money or unexplained bank withdrawals. So, we talked about trusting your bank. get to know, if that's your shared bank, you already know the people at the bank. If it's not your shared bank, get to know them, because you're gonna need to tell them. My husband is not to come in here and withdraw money. I know both of our names are on the account, but if you see that happen, you need to call me. There is no need for him to make a $10,000 withdrawal. Most banks will manage that. They're not gonna do anything unlawful, like say the person can't take any cash out, but they're gonna notify you if you tell them that there's a problem. You know, this is strange, he's been in here 3 times this week withdrawing money, okay? They don't wanna see that happen to you either. Sometimes you can set up auto payment. This is a really good idea. So you notice checks are starting to be miswritten, double written, or not paid at all. You know what? I keep forgetting to pay the car payment. I do it every month. You know what? They have this thing called auto pay. Should we look together? Look how easy that was. We don't have to remember anything. Now everything's on auto pay, and you know exactly how much money is going out each month, and nobody has to write the checks. Okay? You can tell credit card companies to stop calling, set up certain things where your loved one can't have access to new credit cards and things like that. You're gonna have to get ahead of it. Keep your eye on the mail, keep your eye on the bank.
So one of the things that I did, my father was very proud. He really didn't want to admit that he had Alzheimer's. So I wanted him to be able to continue to feel good about himself. So I actually set up a checking savings account for him that was joint with me. Because again, I had power of attorney, so I could move things around a bit. I made sure that he always had $200 in that account. Everything else was protected, and he really didn't have access to it anymore. But he didn't know that because he still had that $200. A couple of years into his diagnosis, he actually had somebody stop at his home. He was outside working in his yard. They came by, a couple, old car, and pulled up to the driveway. They had a child with them and said their child was ill. And they said they needed money for health care for this child. My father was always very generous as he became older and as he became more impaired with Alzheimer's. He became more generous. And so his inclination was to help this couple. They took him to the credit union. They asked him to withdraw all of his funds, so he did. He had access to that $200 that he knew about, and he gave it to them. They left him there in the parking lot, and he walked home. So it was really awful that that happened to him, but his money was protected because of the safeguards that we had put up. Everything else was still there, and I was able to replace that $200. So we tried very hard to do everything we could to protect him financially, but also to make sure that we didn't take away his sense of self-esteem.
Right, so she set up a spending limit. You may need to have power of attorney in order to do that, right? So that's why we have to make sure that we touch base with someone in the legal profession. How do I do this? Everything's in both of our names. This person is no longer able to make those decisions, but I don't want to take away their dignity. So you set spending limits. So you've got auto pay for the bills, we're covered there. No, you stopped all credit card callers, you've called all those numbers, you better stop, put us on the do not call list. And then you've set up spending limits for your loved one, right? So they're all of these documents are in your folder to refer back to, avoiding fraud, identifying financial and legal needs. Okay? You're gonna have to look at money in and money out. You don't have to be really like an accountant, but you're gonna have to figure out, okay, I got this much going out on auto pay, I have this much coming in. Yup, $50, we can go out to dinner this month. Right? You have to start looking at money in, money out. I'm really bad at this. I don't do it. Until all of a sudden I feel like we've been going out to dinner too much. And then I say, we really need to look at this. What's coming in and what's going out. Sometimes.
I'm sorry.
No, go.
I was gonna say, another important thing that I didn't find out till afterwards is that if there's a bank account, you wanna always make sure someone else's name is on there, because if that person passes away and there's no one else on that account, you're not gonna be able to access that money. They're going to freeze it. They're gonna put a hold on it, and then you'll have to go through, all types, yes, surrogacy just to get hold of those funds. So my husband had his own account, Social Security check went in there, the next day they put a hold on it. So just make sure that if you're on there or there's
Right.
someone else that can access the funds.
Right. You can freeze an account if you see something not going well. You can call and freeze an account if your name's on that account. So, we talked about cash in, cash out, right? There's also assets and debt. So assets are like your house, your car, all the things that are worth money, and debt. And so you just need to know if there is debt out there, what's the minimum payment on this so that it doesn't become a problem. You need to know that. You can often call a credit card company or someone who you are indebted to and explain the situation. My loved one has dementia. I'm trying to get this under control. I'm going to have to make minimum payment to you right now. Often people will work with you if you just explain. So rather than being embarrassed and just worrying about this, it's worth a phone call to see if they'll take minimum payment for a while until you can get this under control, right? There are worksheets in your file so that you can make a little budget. How much money's going out for this, how much for that, about how much the groceries cost a month. Do we need winter snow boots? Whatever it is, you can use these forms to do a budget. Okay, so it says total income, total expenses, this is what I got left. Okay, it's a very simple budget. There might be money sitting somewhere that you hadn't thought of. And again, you might need to sit down with a financial expert to find that out. Some people will do an initial hour consultation and won't ask you for any money, as it should be, right? With my uncle, I suddenly found out he had all this money hidden everywhere, literally everywhere. He was walking around with the sole coming off of his shoe, and I thought, gosh, poor Uncle Phil, worked his whole life, doesn't have a dime to his name. He had $50,000 in the wall of the house, in a cookie tin, wrapped in a sheet, hidden behind the ironing board, and don't think, even with mild cognitive impairment, he couldn't direct me to where that money was. I nearly fell off the chair. And when I found it, I was like, oh my God, how, if I bring this to the bank, they're gonna think I'm dealing drugs or something. Where did I get all this money? But he had it, and he wasn't gonna tell me about it until he could trust me. And it took a good long time before he told me. But so there might be money sitting somewhere. He had it everywhere. He had credit union. Everything they told him over the years to invest in. He worked for General Motors. He did it and never touched it. He had veterans benefits. Wow, did that take me a long time to figure that out. I needed help, to Doreen's point. I couldn't, let me just fill out this form. I had to sit down with somebody from the Veterans Administration. It was all foreign to me. And he got thousands every month. He earned that as a serviceman, an active duty serviceman in World War II. So it offset the cost of his senior living, and I didn't have to spend down his money as much. Okay, so you have to figure out what might be there that you're not aware of. I know. Whenever I get mad at my husband, I tell him I'm going to activate your fireman's benefit. Okay. Legal planning, we talked about this. There are certain documents that
Most of these resources you can access online. You can access from multiple different entities. And I did most of all of her documents that were necessary. The power of attorney, the living will, the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. All of those things you can access, and you can get them notarized and legal documents created. So don't let that be a hindrance to take care of those items, because those items are really, really important early on in the disease. If you wait, it's only going to cause more problems. So the earlier you get it, the better. And don't be afraid of the nuances of all these documents and all these papers. It's pretty simplified if you research it. There's a really simple way to go about it. and take care of it as soon as possible.
So what do you do if the person is against you being power of attorney? That takes that all the time.
That's usually a work in progress. Like I said, the first conversation doesn't often go well. Sometimes you have to reverse it. Well, I need you to be my power of attorney, because if something happens to me, what are we gonna do? So you have to try to come at it different ways. Okay, so if I'm, you're mine, then I'm yours. It's a 50-50 deal, right? We're both earning the money. So this is a 50-50 deal. You have to come at it a lot of different ways. It usually doesn't happen the first time. It takes time. And sometimes it's incremental. Okay, so they gave a little on that, right? What about the next thing? Okay, we got the bills on auto pay. Whoop, thank God. Now we're going to talk about power of attorney, right? And it's better to do it while everyone's healthy.
You can't do it when, if they've been deemed that they cannot become, you can't be their power of attorney. If an attorney says, no, they're not confident, and then it comes to the point where someone has to make those decisions, you may have to go and become a legal guardian. Guardianship is not easy and it is expensive. Get that power of attorney.
Yeah, so a lot of people think, well, I'll just wait until they can't fend for themselves, and then I'll just become their guardian. It's a painful process. So, and so it's not fun to talk about power of attorney, even thinking of giving it to somebody. I don't know if I want you to be my power of attorney, right? But someone's gonna have to take care of these matters if you can no longer, right? So, someone doesn't want you to be their power of attorney. Well, you write down every single thing you would want me to do when I'm your power of attorney. You dictate. I'll just follow your lead. Okay?
My mother had vascular dementia, and I'm an only child, so it was just she and I. And, you know, it took me a little time to convince her, you know, that she wasn't giving up anything by deeming me her power of attorney, that it was only when she couldn't make those decisions. Because when you're having the conversation with somebody who's well, they're like, why would I give it to you? I'm fine.
Right.
So the thing is, you have to, I'm not doing anything. You make me your power of attorney. I'm doing nothing now. It's only when you can't make the decisions. And I said to my mother, I said, you know, the problem is, if I'm not your power of attorney, you don't know what's going to happen. It goes into the legal system. And what you may want may not be what the legal system deems appropriate. So you're really not going to have any control over anything. And that was how, you know, I got her, you know, to allow me to be her power of attorney while she was, you know, quite well.
And sometimes the third party has to tell you. Yeah. The third party has to explain. So this document is in your folder. If the words are all strange to you, you can just take it out. Do I need a living will? Do I need durable power of attorney? You know, you'll at least know the terms when you sit down and talk to someone. So I want to make sure that we respectfully wrap up. There are ways to find these resources. You should have this information in the folder that I gave you in the reusable tote. There are phone numbers, there are websites. You want to have that backup plan if you can no longer be the caregiver. Remember to take care of yourself, and remember, this free helpline, 800-272-3900, there should hopefully be a magnet in your folder, and also it's on your tote. If you can't remember something that was said here, it was just too much information, or you have another question, you can call anytime, day or night, 365 days a year. Okay, because as Connie said, we want to make sure that everyone understands the free resources that are available to them. So all I'm going to say in closure, because I know we all have to go, commit to taking one little step. What's bothering you the most? Take one step to being more financially literate and getting your hands and head wrapped around what has to happen next. Okay? Thank you so much for being here.